Before I bought this book, I looked at its table of contents to see whether it would be interesting for me. And I saw that the first chapter was called Let Your Heart Break. And when I read that, I knew that this is going to be an incredibly valuable book. Why is Let Your Heart Break such a valuable message? Quite honestly, I think that's because it's brutal and because it shows us what it means to love. What Lila Rose means by this heartbreak is finding a cause in the world that is so important to you and that touches you so deeply that it feels as if your heart breaks for that cause. In her case, what broke her heart was the realization that abortion brutally ends the lives of innocent human beings. She writes, "Deep grief is often the starting point for righting an injustice. And that's a good thing. Don't run away from that emotion. Sit with it. Let it break you open. Let it move you. Don't suppress it. The world has enough hearts of stone. It needs hearts willing to ache and burn. Grief, as well as the healthy anger that often accompanies it, can fuel your passion to fight a seemingly impossible fight." The book was written by Lila Rose, who is a well-known pro-life advocate and a mother of 3 children. And the book is both an account of her life as well as a call to action to find your cause in this world and to fight for it. The causes you choose to fight for can be very diverse, and they don't have to be as big as stopping abortion. You wouldn't have been born if God didn't have a plan and a purpose for you in your life. So find your cause and fight for it. This can mean being the best parent or grandparent for your children, but it can also mean something like evangelization or doing charity work. Mrs. Rose also reminds her readers that some causes are safe and others aren't. For example, being pro-life isn't a safe cause because it's controversial, whereas trying to end poverty is usually uncontroversial. Think about what your calling is. What are your gifts? As Mrs. Rose writes, "Our gifts are the weapons needed to change the world." You have talents and experiences that are needed to change the world. For example, if you're emotionally strong, you can tackle a controversial topic. If you're great at public speaking, use that for good. And God can even turn your weaknesses into weapons. For example, Lila Rose writes in her book that when she was 19, she went undercover to reveal certain problems with Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is basically an abortion clinic. What helped her was that she looked much younger than 19, and so she could pretend to be 13. That way, she was able to reveal that Planned Parenthood was willing to break the law by not reporting to the police. Apparently in the US, pregnant girls under a certain age need to be reported to the police, and she revealed that Planned Parenthood would illegally help a 13-year-old girl stay anonymous. I always thought that looking younger than you are when you're 19 is a weakness. But this shows us how God can turn something like that into a weapon. You can also use past hurtful experiences or mistakes for God's glory. For example, by helping others who are in a similar situation as you. As St. Catherine of Siena once said, "Be who you are created to be, and you will set the world on fire." So as long as you can raise your hand, what you do with that hand matters. As long as you're capable of formulating a clear thought, your decisions matter. And as long as you breathe, your life matters. Aspire to be a force for good through everything that you do, at work, while relaxing, and through prayer. For example, try to improve the day of every person you meet. That can be as simple as smiling at them, offering your assistance, or paying them a compliment. Treat others well, because that in itself can be seen as a form of evangelization. In John 13:35 it says, "By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Try to fulfill the commandment to love your neighbor as yourself so well that you don't have to tell people that you're Christian anymore. Either way, whatever you want to change in this world, it's important to change yourself first, and by describing her journey, the author shares some ideas on how to do that. You might be unsure about what your vocation is, and you might not know what your place in the world is, and what to use your talents for. But one thing is for sure, we're all called to be saints. Some people think that they'll start living their purpose once they're married. Nothing could be further from the truth. If you're single right now, there's a reason for that. Use the time you have right now to do good. Single life is not a waiting period for marriage. You have much more time and much less responsibilities than if you were married with children. Maybe God calls you to marriage and one day you will be married, but in the meantime, don't just sit around and wait for marriage, but rather do good in your current state of life. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. Also, let me remind you what St. Paul writes in his letter to the Corinthians. To the unmarried and the widows I say that it is well for them to remain single as I do. But if they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry. For it is better to marry than to be aflame with passion. The unmarried man is anxious about the affairs of the Lord, how to please the Lord. But the married man is anxious about worldly affairs, how to please his wife, and his interests are divided. And the unmarried woman or girl is anxious about the affairs of the Lord, how to be holy in body and spirit. But the married woman is anxious about worldly affairs, how to please her husband. I say this for your own benefit, not to lay any restraint upon you, but to promote good order and to secure your individual devotion to the Lord. So again, single life is not a waiting period for marriage. I don't know what else you're called to do, but I know what you're not called to do. You're not called to sit around and wait for something special to happen that will start your life and give you a goal and a purpose. Find your cause right now. Wherever you are in life and whatever your current situation is, you can and should start now. We're commanded in the Bible to be fruitful and multiply. This command should be taken seriously. But as St. Augustine writes in his Confessions, the meaning of being fruitful and multiplying isn't limited to having children. Spread the faith, do good, and be who God created you to be, no matter where you are in your life. Now, it might be interesting to know if I'm saying all of this as someone who's single or in a relationship. And I can tell you that I am moving on with the next topic, which is how you can be fruitful and multiply right now in your life. As Mrs. Rose advises in her book, you can take the following steps. Allow your heart to love, find good role models, go to daily mass, frequent the sacraments, educate yourself, accept advice, get a spiritual director, and dress well. Regarding the first point about allowing yourself to love and consequently be hurt by that love, I've already said a lot at the beginning of this video, but I'd like to read another quote from the book. As adults, we may need to recognize and dismantle the self-protective mechanisms we use to ward off heartbreak. We may need to let go of judgments or cynicism that allow us to justify the suffering of others. We may need to enter into another person's need or suffering rather than numbing our sorrow or anger over tragedy. We may need to look beyond the routine distractions of daily life, including the pursuit of our own comfort or interest, so that our hearts can be broken by the pain of those in need. As mentioned, Lila Rose also highlights the importance of role models, and she describes which people inspired her. Her confirmation saint, for example, is Saint Joan of Arc, and her other role models include Mother Teresa and Saint Maximilian Kolbe. I'd like to add here that when you're looking for role models, you don't have to find someone whose life you then try to copy. That's not the point. Only Mother Teresa is called to be Mother Teresa, and only Lila Rose is called to be Lila Rose. And no one except you is called to be you. For example, you could try to find saints which had similar personalities as you, and then get inspired by their general approach to life. For example, maybe you're as ambitious and driven as Saint Ignatius of Loyola, or maybe you're as gentle and loving as Saint Therese of Lisieux, or maybe you love nature and animals just like Saint Francis of Assisi. You could also look for role models which started their journey to sanctity in a way that you can relate to. In my opinion, starting is usually more difficult than continuing to do something, and once you have some inspiration on how to start, you'll figure out what to do with your life along the way through prayer. The reason to work on yourself first, before helping others, is that this way God can work better through you. Just like light can shine brighter through perfectly clear glass. And when you start doing all that and want to serve God even more, ask Him to use you for whatever He needs. Lila Rose also writes in the book that she used the prayer a couple of times, where she just asked God to use her and work through her. Maybe you think that you can barely take care of your own soul and can't imagine how you could ever help other people too. The secret here is that you on your own can do nothing, but you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. You might be familiar with the Bible passage where the disciples tried to catch fish and didn't succeed until they were under Christ's leadership. In the same way, we're not able to bring any souls to Christ without His help. Also, don't let yourself get discouraged from the fact that you might not be the most qualified. As the author writes, we cannot afford to leave the great work of our world's most pressing causes to others because we imagine they are somehow more prepared, better qualified, or simply braver. Instead, We can look to those who have gone before us, learn what we can, and courageously get to work. Also, don't be jealous of other people and their callings. You don't know the full story of their life, and it might very well be that if you were to live their life and to have their sufferings, those sufferings would crush you. Everyone suffers in their life, and your talents, joys, and sufferings are perfectly tailored for you. As Lila Rose writes, the solution to envy and comparison is twofold. Focus on what you've set out to do with the talents and abilities God gave you, then trust that God will help you make the best of the gifts you've been given. So aim high and let God shine through you. Apart from being the best thing you can do with your finite life, it will likely also make you more fulfilled because you'll have a goal that is greater than yourself. And another potential benefit might be that you'll meet new friends or maybe even your future spouse. That's much more likely to happen through a shared activity than while watching movies at home. Now let's get to my opinion on the book. I think it's great and I would highly recommend it to everyone, but particularly to young women who are looking for role models. So I'd say that this book would be perfect as a gift for confirmation or as a birthday present for a teenager. What I think makes this book particularly valuable to this age group is that Lila Rose often doesn't explicitly say what to do, she doesn't tell you what to do, but she rather shows you what to do by describing her own story. I need to add that the book discusses serious topics as well, so if you're the parent and you don't want your child to be exposed to those topics, do whatever you think is best. The book includes topics like abortion, sex trafficking, sex work, self-harm, suicide, and eating disorders. I would rate the book a 9 out of 10, and the one thing that was missing in my opinion was a bit more explanation or more guidance on vocational discernment. The author describes in much detail what led her to certain decisions in her life, and she shows her tactical approach to her life. For example, she writes that she chose her college based on the fact that there were a few pro-life students there, so that she could have a greater impact as a pro-life advocate. And what was missing for me is that she hardly discussed her vocation as a wife and mother, and what the reasons were to choose that vocation at that point in her life. It might be obvious that a pro-life advocate will become a mother one day, but if this book is supposed to be a guide on how to become a force for good in a wounded world, then this very crucial aspect was missing in my opinion. Marrying is one of the most consequential things you can do, and I would have appreciated if it were discussed in the book in more detail. But I've heard that if you support Lila Rose on Locals, you get access to an unpublished chapter of the book. So if I had to guess, I would say that this unpublished chapter is something about her vocation. Overall, I think that the book is very valuable and that it motivates the reader to take action in their life and become a fighter for good, just like Lila Rose. That's been it for today. I hope you liked the video. See you soon and God bless. Bye!